It is Thursday. It's a little bit late today for the podcast. Mostly because this is the third attempt to record. And I'll basically tell you why right off the start here. Not feeling so great. My stomach has been upset most of the morning. It's sort of settled now, and I'm hoping just empty. And it's not been great. It's not been great. It's not been spectacular. But I'm here to break down the UFC fight card, Dern versus Jan. We'll talk a little bit about Bellator, and I guess we'll talk about ONE Championship on Amazon Prime. It's kind of a disappointing card, though, actually, on Amazon Prime, because they stacked up their last one, the Demetrius Johnson versus Adriano Moraes card. And they had a lot of interesting, prospects. You had Bushetta, you had Amir Ali Akbari, you had Yuri Lapicus on the card. It was by ONE standards, very, very, very stacked card. And this time around, not really. We get Angela Lee versus Zhang Zhao. Zhang. I think it's Zhang. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with the Chinese names. And Angela Lee's probably gonna win. They don't generally put Angela Lee in fights where she's going to lose in general. But I am actually really looking forward to the grappling match between Mike Musumeci and Kleber Souza. That's actually pretty cool. Mike Musumeci is a super, super interesting grappler. So that is worth tuning in. And of course, most people already have Prime, so you can do it for free. Hopefully they'll be a little bit better than last time. And things can just be a little bit better. Again, a little bit better all around. And then in Bellator, you have the Adam Borage versus Pitbull card. We'll talk about that very, very briefly. I'm thinking this will be a shorter episode today because, like I said, little hoarse in the throat. Stomach is gurgling and not super happy about everything. So it's going to be a little bit rushed. I think that's also partially because this UFC fight card actually is pretty deep. They're interesting, meaningful fights. If we go through my hierarchy of good matchmaking, a lot of them I think will be entertaining. There are questions to be answered in every fight. And the fighters, and with a couple exceptions, there are 2 or 3 fights on here that are not spectacular. But there's a lot of fights here that will answer questions, close rankings. They're fights that, for the most part, I can see either side winning without tremendous difficulty. But a lot of them kind of are also reductive fights from an analyst standpoint because they kind of come down to one small portion of the MMA skill set. A lot of them do. And Jan versus Dern is a perfect example of this. With Jan versus Dern, you have a pretty simple dynamic, an old school dynamic. You have Jan, the striker, effectively, who has learned to grapple, learned to wrestle fairly well. You have Dern, who is the grappling machine, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dynamo. Legend is probably too strong of a word, but people treat her as such. Who has learned to strike on a reasonable level and is fairly durable. Still a bad striker, I want to make that quite clear, but improving most of the time and with the right intangibles of fearlessness, core durability, and well, that's really it. I mean, it's the durability and the fact that she doesn't really get discouraged when the striking goes against her. And Jan's not a huge knockout artist. Jan has, I want to say, not finished anyone in the UFC, but I Could be mistaken. Decision. Yeah, all of her wins in the UFC are by decision. Claudia Gadelha, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Angela Hill, Suri Kondo, Viviane Pereira, and Kailin Curran. The only one of those that really impresses me for the record is Angela Hill. Kowalkiewicz and Gadelha are like good names, but like heavily on the decline when she fought them in 2020. And Kondo is kind of a fighter who's never really put it together. Same with Pereira. And Curran is straight up bad. Curran's long run in the UFC actually really just kind of confuses me because they signed her as a 3-0 fighter, I thought, just to kind of feed to Paige Van Zandt. And then she ended up losing to Alex Chambers, beating Emily Kagan, but then losing to Felice Harrig, Jamie Moyle, Alexandra Albu, and then Jan. And like two of those have really not turned out all that well. She's done okay in Invicta. Losing to Brianna Fortino is not at all a shame. And the win over Davis Daughter and Sarah Jacobson are good wins. Okay wins. But anyways, we're talking about someone who's not on the card at that point. Betting odds for this fight. Dern, the 230 favorite. Jan, the 190 underdog. Makes sense. Dern has the hype. She has the fan following. She has, you would have to assume, the casual money. And I do tend to agree. Like, the thing is that watching Jan versus Carla Esparza and versus Claudia Gadelha, she is not very good at preventing low body takedowns. And to be clear, Mackenzie Dern is more of an upper body player. She's more of a tosser, more of a sacrifice throw, more of a drag it to the ground type. And Jan does seem to be fairly good at defending against that type of takedown, but also hasn't faced anyone particularly good at it. She did fight Claudia Gadelha, who is not bad at that, but by the time Gadelha was working upper body takedowns, she'd gotten tired. Because, I mean, Claudia Gadelha in her prime had significant cardio issues, and towards the end, that meant that she had like one good round in her. And in that one good round, she took down Jan without really any particular issues. And Esparza cut right through that. So I have a hard time thinking that this fight isn't going to end up on the ground at some point. Jan has some really bad grappling tendencies. We're talking like just doing the wrong things, like things that make sense, things that are correct, but are not correct for the time. Like the Esparza fight had a great example of this, where Esparza is working for the crucifix that eventually ends the fight. And Jan is doing nothing to prevent the crucifix, which is obviously being worked for. Instead, she's just kind of got the cross-leg guard against mount. And like that's an example of like, you're doing something that is quote-unquote correct. That is technically not the wrong thing to be doing. But it's doing nothing for what your opponent on top of you is actually trying to do. And it got her finished then. And Mackenzie Dern is not necessarily a better top grappler than Carla Esparza, but she's a more varied one and a more submission-oriented one. I foresee her taking advantage of the fact that Jan's understanding of grappling still seems to be very limited, very basic, and to exploit that. Like, at some point, this is going to the ground, and Dern's going to submit her. That's my read. But obviously, Jan could also do what Marina Rodriguez did to a certain degree. Just kind of bang it out. But she doesn't have anywhere near the power. I also don't think she has anywhere near the reach that Rodriguez does to actually pull off that game plan. One of the easier fights to call on paper is the Randy Brown, Francisco Trinaldo co-main event. Brown coming in as one of the bigger favorites on the card, minus 300. I think that's the second largest favorite on the card. Stunningly enough. Yeah, it's tied. It's tied for the second largest favorite on the card. So minus 300 versus plus 250 for Trinaldo. With Trinaldo, it's just a question of time. 44 years old. That's old. Basically, anyway, like even at heavyweight, that is old. He still is crisp. He still is surprisingly fast. Still is surprisingly accurate. Carries a surprising amount of power. Like everything is surprising when you're in there with a 44-year-old man. Ow, that hurt. Where did that come from? Why is this happening? But he's also exceptionally low output. Like he is a guy who is reliant on punctuation moments, getting a clean shot, stumbling an opponent, hurting an opponent a little bit with his strikes to actually win exchanges and win rounds, because he's not going to throw enough to win it on volume or even make the volume particularly close. Randy Brown has 8 inches of reach. He's a fast guy on his own right. He's a very physical fighter. Has all the physical tools to apply his game, his range boxing, his range kicking. If it goes to the clinch, I think he's strong enough to resist there. Because, Trinaldo is a guy who is still very strong for a lightweight, but this is a welterweight bout. So I have to go with Randy Brown by decision. There's just not enough opportunities, I think, for Trinaldo to hurt him in significant, meaningful ways during the fight. And if you're going to cede the volume advantage to Randy Brown and 8 inches of reach, you're in for a rough night. So, Randy Brown. Honey Barcelos, Trevin Jones. Minus 225 for Barcelos, plus 190 for Trevin Jones. Trevin Jones is a weird fighter in the sense that if you look at his career, there are some fantastic moments. The knockout of Mario Bautista in his UFC debut is a great example of this. His win over Timur Valiev, which was then ruled a no contest, is an excellent example of this. What did he test positive for again? Marijuana. That sours me. He's also beaten guys like Takafumi Otsuka, good fighter, but he's also lost very convincingly to fighters that are not necessarily that good. And it's because his fighting style can only really be described as janky. It has surprising bright spots, and not even like in the way of Francisco Trinaldo. Trinaldo has, to back up a fight, Trinaldo has just really clean technique that when he throws can result in danger. Trevin Jones, it's more like the danger literally comes out of left field. Like he'll be losing pretty convincingly and then pull off something stupid. And it works. And that's kind of his game. I have to think that Barcelos, who I'm a big fan of, and yes, is on a 2-fight losing skid, and yes, is reaching the end of his run, I think, 35 years old. Bantamweight is not kind to the elderly. And not that he's elderly, because again, I'm 35, but I would be old in a UFC cage. He's still got good power, good durability, still not getting finished. He got out-created, out-worked by Victor Henry. It's not something Trevin Jones does. He got out-physicaled by Timur Valiev. Jones is physical, but not in any kind of consistent, applicable way, and not on the level of Timur Valiev, even though he won that fight. So I am going with Barcelos. I just think that, there's more structure to his striking game. He's a better grappler. He's a better wrestler. I could see him picking up a submission. Jones has been tapped a couple of times, but I could also see it going to decision because I think during this losses he's become ever so slightly gun shy. So, Barcelos by decision, and then we go to the biggest favorite on the card, Sodiq Yusuff versus Don Shanish. Shamish? I'm not honestly sure. It's even been pronounced differently by every announcer I listen to. I don't want to downplay Don Sheamus here because I actually think he's a pretty interesting prospect. I think he's fairly strong. I think he has a good stalking, power striking into wrestling game. I think he has good physicality. I think he knows what he is and he's defined and what he's defined in and his winning conditions. The problem is that his winning conditions are basically just walk into exactly what Sodiq Yusuff wants to do. And Sodiq Yusuff is, let's just say, on a different level than anyone Sheamus has managed to implement his game on, because his biggest win is Cody Pfister. And Sodiq Yusuff is on a different level, it would be fair to say. And there's a reason he's a minus 900 favorite to Cody Pfister. This is not to say that Sodiq Yusuff is an amazing fighter. I've kind of said it. He is the poster child, along with a couple of the other guys who've come in through the Lloyd Irvin system recently, of the Lloyd Irvin system, which is I take really solid athletes, teach them fundamentally sound skills, but very shallow ones, where you'll see Yusuff respond to the same thing pretty much the same way throughout the fight, and even like other things. Like he'll have a solution for this plethora of attacks. And it's something that a fighter like Arnold Allen can get around, for sure, just by being at a physical disadvantage. But it's not something that I think Don Shanish can get around. And that's why I'm taking Sodiq by decision. He could finish him. He could. He's got some good power sub games. He hits hard, everything like that. But he's pretty happy to win a decision. He's pretty happy to not really take massive risks to get finishes. And I think it's reflected by the fact that his only finishes in the UFC, Gabriel Benitez and Sumo Mokhtarian, were basically put on a platter for him. Like with Benitez, Benitez was very much giving him the exchanges he wanted and allowed him to land with power. And with Mokhtarian, Mokhtarian is just terrible. Like, he was an 8-0 can crusher when he came into the UFC. Both of his fights in the UFC. I am, to this day, a little bit surprised that he made it the distance with Sting. Because Sting hits hard. But, like, a terrible, terrible fighter. Sodiq Yusuff to win this fight. And to be the and to close out the biggest dog on the card. Plus 600 for Sheamus and minus 900 for Yusuff. John Castaneda versus Daniel Santos. This is a surprisingly close one in the betting line here. Castaneda is only a minus 220 favorite against the Willie Gat, who is plus 180. I like Santos's nickname. I like Santos's creativity. It's fun to watch. But like nothing fits together. Nothing. It's a lot of inefficient movement. It leads me to believe that he has to be a capoeira fighter. I don't think I have confirmation of that anywhere. He is a Muay Thai fighter, is what he is listed as, and trains out of a notable MMA Muay Thai gym, Shootbox Diego Lima. But there has to be some capoeira in the way that he fights, because it is very open. It is defensively. It is inefficient. It causes him to get tired very quickly. And yeah, I got to take John Castaneda by TKO, because John Castaneda is a methodical, solid fighter. Throws good combinations, crisp, fast hands, decent foot speed, mixes the wrestling in, trains with Greg Nelson. So I think everyone's kind of always thrown off about how good of a wrestler he is because you think John Cass, hey, oh, Mexican. Mexican fighters have not historically had the greatest of wrestling. But no, he's born in the States. It's a Roger Huerta situation. Born in the States, trains out of the academy in Minnesota with Greg Nelson, like I said. The guy who produced Sean Sherk, Brock Larson, the GOAT Nick Thompson, Jacob Volkman. He's going to go out there and should break this down and pick up the finish. Like, I'm honestly surprised that a guy who has 0 wins in the UFC and Daniel Santos is this small of an underdog. Yes, he fought Julio Arce, and Julio Arce is a really, really good fighter. But there's nothing to believe that what he wants to do is actually going to work at this level. Mike Davis versus Slaviclas Vyacheslav Borshev. Davis is minus 175 favorite. I can't disagree with that. Plus 180 plus 150 on Slaviclas. Slaviclas coming in on late notice. This was supposed to be Mike Davis versus Uros Medic. I think this is actually a way more interesting fight, but it's a similar dynamic. I don't think it's going to affect Davis's preparation. Davis is a good all-rounder. Super exciting fighter. Love him. Big fan. He's got solid grappling, good scrambler, good takedown artist, smart hands, good combinations, swift, decently powerful. Not a huge puncher by any means, but a guy who it's not pleasant to take abuse from for a long time against. Borshev, more a specialist, good kickboxer. Supposedly, I haven't really seen it in the fights that he's had in the UFC where I've been wowed by his striking. It's good, but they were making a very big deal about when he came in. I just kind of expected more, I guess. Training with Team Alpha Male, trying to work in the wrestling, trying to work in the anti-scrambling, trying to work into the anti-grappling game. I don't think that's happened yet. I mean, he definitely has good spirit. He doesn't accept bad positions. He'll keep trying to scramble. He'll keep trying to do good things. But what generally stands out about him is that he still gets put into bad position after bad position after bad position. And that's why I got to take Mike Davis. He's got the pace. He's got the grappling acumen. He will get the opportunities to apply it. Borshev doesn't seem to have great one-punch knockout power or particularly amazing ability to damage you. In general, it doesn't seem like there's necessarily a huge physical aspect to his striking. And I'm taking Mike Davis. Picking favorite Ilir Latifi at minus 175 against plus 145. I hate to reduce this fight because this fight is a fight I've been interested in for a long time. A lot of hardcore fans have been interested in. It's a meme fight. But Alexei Olenek versus Ilir Latifi kind of just comes down to the fact that Ilir Latifi is the human sentient equivalent of a fridge. And I don't see how you choke him. So, yeah, Latifi by decision. Olenek will get his opportunities because I don't think that there's a version of Latifi as a fighter that doesn't work with takedowns, that functions devoid of a wrestling game. But I just don't think he can do it. But it wouldn't be the first time that Olenek did something unexpected. I mean, that is his career. That is Alexei Olenek's entire career, doing the unexpected. Tabitha Richie versus Jessica Penne. I would like to pick Baby Shark. She seems like a lovely person. I am not super excited about her as a fighter, but she does seem to very much know what she is and tries to make adjustments and tries to fight in a relatively smart manner. But it comes down to this. Really, actually, this comes down to two things. Richie is too small for strawweight. She's an atomweight. Penne is 39 years old. And earlier I described someone at 35 as old. You can imagine what 39 is in the MMA world. But the thing is with Penne's age hasn't really come a tremendous regression. Her her regression, her struggles, her losses have honestly just been more about the fact that she's always had kind of a throwback skill set. That there's just missing links in her game that would actually make her very effective. I don't think it's that she's gotten super slow or super undurable or lacking in explosiveness or not being able to be dangerous, to scramble, to play the jiu-jitsu game. And it's kind of all Richie does. Like, if you look at Richie's last fight against Polyana Viana, Viana is a younger, more physical version of Penne, to be sure. But she's also an infinitely dumber version of Penne and was able to put Richie in some very, very bad spots. Arguably won the fight. And I can't really think of anyone who's beaten Penne just off of grappling her. Emily Ducote struck with her. Daniel Taylor struck with her. Jessica Andrade struck with her. Joanna Jędrzejczyk struck with her. I guess you could go back all the way to 2014, The Ultimate Fighter Season 20, when she lost to Carla Esparza. I haven't watched that fight in a while, but I do imagine it was predominantly a jiu-jitsu exchange because Esparza's stand-up at the time was quite poor. But like almost everyone I list there just has a way better non-jiu-jitsu game. And in many cases, with the perhaps exception of Esparza, are incredibly physical people. Like Andrade and Taylor are tanks. Joanna Jędrzejczyk needs no introduction, I feel. And as a result of this, I kind of see the Polyana Viana versus Richie fight playing out again. And Penne getting the win. And doing the same things, but just like being better at what Viana was able to do. And that's why I'm taking the dog here, plus 180 Penne, minus 220 on Richie. Is this the first dog I have taken on the night? Does look like it. I think I have one later on as well. Yes, I do. Not much more to say. Like, I'll be cheering to be wrong because, like I said, I like Richie, like the energy she provides. Never really have been a big fan of Penne's energy, and it's nothing to do with like judging her necessarily as a person, although she was a bully on Tough. And here's the thing. Everyone will always suggest that, and I've said this before, that Tough will make you look bad or good in accordance to the story that they are telling. And I think that there's a remarkable amount of truth to that. I think that there is a lot of situations where someone has been made to be the villain and just it never really makes any sense down the road. But in the case of Tough 20, what they were doing, and by this I'm talking about the bullying of Randa Marcos, what they were doing, or Randa Marcos, I should say, what they were doing is something you don't do if you're not bullying. Like, it's kind of like trying to come up with like a super high school cliche bully moment. That like just would not work. And anyway, I can't really think of anything. It's almost like I was thinking like stuffing someone in a garbage can or something, but like without the story behind that, maybe like they stuck you in a garbage can first. Like the best thing that the best defense that Penne and company had was essentially that like Marcos might have been bullying them first, and it's like, wow, how mature, how mature, and I kind of doubt it. Anyways, Pena by decision. Neto BJJ, Joaquim Silva, Jesse Ronson. I'm actually surprised both of these guys are still on the roster. Neto BJJ has not fought in, I wanted to say like forever, and then I looked at his record and realized he actually did have a 2021 fight against Ricky Glenn. So, not that far ago, I guess. Both these guys are like just flawed fighters. I didn't really ever expect would have success in the UFC. Like with Neto BJJ, it's Vitor Belfort kind of 2.0 without like the steroid induced like physicality. It's, yes, you are a fairly good athlete, not lacking in physicality, but your fighting style is kind of like going back to Daniel Santos, I was talking about earlier, although without the capoeira bits. Super open, just super open to being taken apart and like enforced a grappling game on, it's just like kind of like you either come out and like scare the crap out of an opponent with a style like he has, or you lose. And at the UFC level, you're not going to scare the crap out of most opponents, or you just have to be like way more physical. And the thing is he probably is way more physical than Jesse Ronson. Jesse Ronson is 21-11. I think that says it all. He's a guy who doesn't necessarily fight in a slick manner. He does fight in a manner that like allows for physicality to be imposed upon him pretty easily. Silva will probably do that. Probably win a decision. But at the same time, both of these guys have been incredibly irregular in the octagon, so ring rust might be a thing. We'll see. Brendan Allen versus Kristoff Yaco. I was ready to have like the hot take with this fight, honestly, and then I looked at the betting line and found out that Yaco is actually the favorite, although the smallest favorite on the card, -115 to -105. It was just like all the noise in social media and in podcasts was like singing the praises of Brendan Allen, and I want to believe in Brendan Allen. I do. Like the concept, like what Brendan Allen looks like competing on a high level is just kind of fun to me to think about. But that Jacob Malkoun fight, oh boy, that sucked the wind out of my sails on Brendan Allen again. And it's happened a couple of times. Like the Kyle Daukaus fight was another example of like a fight that he ended up winning. And same with the Malkoun fight, but like just absolutely sucked the wind out of my sails. Like I thought we were kind of getting somewhere when he beat Carl Roberson and Puna Soriano and, had a pretty impressive performance, even if beating Sam Alvey is not really worth anything. But the loss to Chris Curtis, the loss, the fights with Malkoun, with Daukaus, these have all just kind of let it, I don't know. Right when I'm getting ready to believe in Allen, it falls apart. He's not good when he doesn't have a reach advantage. Yaco is actually longer than him. Yaco is an exceptionally good neutralizing striker, grappler, clincher. Everything about his game is smothering. And I just see that frustrating Allen and just having him present increasingly more opportunities to continue to neutralize him by Yaco. Not getting finished by any means. Yaco is not a finisher, and that's why people find him exceptionally boring. And I can't necessarily disagree with it. Like, he is not a super exciting fighter. But at the same time, I just think he takes all the tools away from Allen at some point and just drowns him in a neutralizing blanket on all aspects of the fight. The other underdog I'm picking is Felipe Lins, who is a +145 underdog against Maxine Grishin. I don't know why Grishin's a favorite. Grishin's like trademark is I beat people with super shallow games, either in the sense that what they want to do, like their A game is shallow, or in the sense of B, their A game maybe is kind of deep, but like everything else is non-existent. It's kind of like he's the guy who like, oh, you're a kickboxer. Okay, I will wrestle you. Oh, you're a kickboxer, but you're kind of just like just like an athlete. Okay, we can kickbox. Oh, you're a wrestler. Well, I can kickbox with you. Sort of deal. And with Felipe Lins, I'm still not sure what the ceiling is at 205 with him returning to it after 4 years at heavyweight. But he looks good. Looks physical. Looks strong. Looks pretty quick, actually. Has notably fast hands for the weight class. Has a pretty deep boxing game. He does a lot of different things. He's a good grappler. He's hard to take down, hard to control. This is not William Knight, who Grishin beat. This is more akin to the fights that Grishin has lost in his UFC tenure to not Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby is a way better fighter, and not necessarily Marcin Tybura, but like closer to that than something like William Knight or Gadzimir Antigulov, who is just a mess of a fighter. Antigulov is like the weirdest fighter of all time. Not the weirdest fighter of all time, but like, I never got behind. I never understood. Like, incredibly dangerous for like a round, and then just the wheels absolutely fall off. Like, it's weird. Has just a side note here. Antigulov does have a decision. He has gone the distance once. I'm actually surprised by that. But like, one decision in 30 fights. My God. I don't think I've ever seen that fight against Rasho Darpian. But I kind of want to watch it now. Because it's probably horrifying by the end. I'm going with Lins. I think he's a deeper boxer. I think he's and I think he can get this done. Julia Stoliarenko took a late notice fight against Chelsea Chandler. This was supposed to be Leah Letson versus Chandler. I don't know why they're doing this at 140. I think both of these girls are perfect for 145. Chandler has always looked bad cutting down to bantamweight, but I guess that's what the UFC signed her, because originally her fight with Letson was supposed to be that. Which is weird, because Letson's fought at 145 most of her career. I don't know. I don't understand this idea of like, let's have a 145-pound division and then never book fights in it. Like, it's just kind of silly. Like, I get it. It's just like, it was... Well, actually, I don't even get it, because like, the division was created for Cyborg. Ostensibly. But they didn't put her in the first title fight. They didn't put her in the first fight in the division. They made her cut to 140 repetitively. And they let Jermaine Durandamine be the first ever featherweight champ. I don't know. The whole featherweight thing is just absolutely confusing to me. It boggles the mind. Anyways, for this fight, I am pretty much never going to pick Julia Stoliarenko to win a fight. She is the Lithuanian Ronda Rousey, but like without the dynamic physicality that made Ronda Rousey, in the sense that she's an arm collector. She's got excellent arm bars. She's got different ways of hitting them. Seriously, like, she could teach a seminar on the arm bar. But that's all there is. She can't really strike. She's not super strong in the clinch. She doesn't have great takedowns. She did just armbar Jessica Rose Clark, and we're starting to believe that Jessica Rose Clark is the armbar me girl. So Chandler has had some hype behind her. I've been fairly impressed with the physicality. Trains with a good jiu-jitsu gym in Cesar Gracie, home of the Diaz brothers, home of Jake Shields, home of Gil Melendez. One would think that she's going to be able to stay out of the submissions, get the fight down, do her thing, and it should be a fairly straightforward win. But we'll find out. And it's kind of interesting that Chandler is actually the underdog. So, I mean, the smallest of underdogs, minus 105 to minus 115. But I guess that is my third dog on the card. And then the opening fight of the night is a perfect opening fight. It's two grade A action fighters, Randy Costa, Guido Canetti. Guido Canetti is 42. This is kind of like my weird, like, pointing out ages card, I guess. Costa's win over Journey Newsom is actually aging a lot better. And his performance against Adrian Yanez in a loss is actually looking a lot better as well. Canetti did knock out Chris Moutinho. Explosive, high power guy. Not super durable himself, though. Gets tired. Not super deep. It's very much just kind of a meats and potatoes power striking game that he employs. I'm not the biggest believer in Costa, if I'm being completely honest. Like, he's kind of one of those guys who's like made his bones being pretty athletic. And when he's hit the UFC, it's been clear that his own repertoire for striking and grappling and fighting is very, very thin. But if you're going to put two guys whose games are fundamentally about power striking without depth, I have to take the younger, tough, more durable Randy Costa to win by TKO. And he is the minus 300 favorite to Guido Canetti at plus 240, which does make him the second largest favorite on the card. Tied with Randy Brown, anyways. So that is the card. Let's go over Bellator real quick. Not going to go super deep here. Again, not feeling amazing. Patricio Pitbull versus Adam Borage. Borage is a fighter that like I didn't really expect much out of when he came in, but like the dynamicism, the athleticism have been undeniable. Dude is this dude that's got like Wonder Boy? Oh, it's just the kid. Super interesting fighter. I do tend to think Patricio Pitbull will win the fight. Veteran savvy, that kind of thing. Essentially just veteran savvy and having been around a while and being a guy who is super deep in technique and still very, very physical. So Pitbull to win against Adam Borage. AJ McKee to submit Spike Carlisle. Spike Carlisle is just a mess, but it's exciting. It's fun. Watch that fight. It's gonna be a banger. Aaron Pico versus Jeremy Kennedy. I have to go with Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico's losses historically have come from being caught and dynamic forms of offense, such as from Adam Borage when he caught him with a flying knee to ground and pound. That's not Jeremy Kennedy's game. Kennedy is very much a clinch guy, wrestling guy, break you down, pressure fighter, methodical. These are the things I think Pico, who is a supremely good athlete and looks exceptionally good right now, physically. Let's have a drug test. And yeah, that's the type of fight that Pico wins. Kennedy's durable enough to make a decision, probably. Juan Archuleta versus Enrique Barzola. Kind of a simple fight to call. I like Barzola. I really like Barzola. But when he's not had a wrestling advantage over people, he's had a really, really hard time making anything work. Archuleta is actually a really good wrestler. Not necessarily the most physical, not necessarily the most explosive wrestler, but like his technique is on point. You're not going to enforce a wrestling game on him easily. I taking Archuleta by decision. Max Roshkov is on the card. He's going to beat Mike Hamill. I hope. I'm hoping Roshkov still turns into something. He was the guy who famously quit on the stool despite Robert Drysdale trying to get him to fight on at the UFC in the UFC against Austin Hubbard. But he's done well since then. I still have faith that he is going to turn into something reasonable. Although he's not listed with Drysdale anymore. Although I guess I can't blame him for that. Islam Mamedov versus Nick Brown. Taking Mamedov. I'm taking Richard Palencia to beat CJ Hamilton. This is the biggest test of his career, though. And then there's not much after that. JJ Wilson versus Vladimir Talkoff. That's a fun fight. I'm taking Talkoff to win that. And I'm also taking Lance Gibson Jr. to beat Dominic Clark in what should be fairly straightforward. Weber Almeida to beat Ryan Lilly. And again, fairly straightforward fight. So there you go. The rest of this is just kind of filler. But to be honest, that's a pretty deep fight card. Like, you've got 6 fights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6 fights at the top. 7 fights at the top of the card that are actually, like, really solid. And a couple of gems later on with the action fight between Wilson and Talkoff and Gibson and the sort of showcase fights for Lance Gibson Jr. and Weber Almeida. Anyways, I'll finish it off with just a quick note here. I got quoted by a publication, actually. It was just a fans reaction tweet thing, but hey, it's still neat. Essentially sports with some of my talk with the Conor McGregor stuff. What I was talking about with the Conor McGregor stuff is he's not been tested for steroids in 2 years, PEDs in general. And there's just all kinds of excuses being made for him that don't really hold up water. Oh, he's injured. They wouldn't test him. They test other injured fighters. Oh, he's retired. Hasn't announced that to my knowledge. And to be honest, considering that we're on like what, a retirement number 4 for Conor McGregor, that doesn't really mean anything. And they're still testing people like Travis Brown, John Hathaway, and there was somebody else that was Sheldon Westcott. Sheldon Westcott was still being tested despite having not fought for like years. So I'll put a link to that in the description below. Hope you enjoyed. Check the links down below. The link tree has everything you need to access the Discord and other social medias, as well as the other sources for this podcast: Spotify, Acast, Anchor, YouTube. Check it out on your platform of choice, and I will be back to review this card, hopefully, and hopefully I'll be feeling a good deal better about the whole thing.